everybody, it's Cinnamon Cooney, your Art Sherpa, and today is a very exciting day. I'm going to be showing you how to create realistic 3D water drops that you can do yourself at home in watercolor paint. To help me do this is my husband, John.
Hello.
He's going to make sure that as I'm demonstrating techniques, explaining materials and tools, and how this is done, you can actually see everything really well with one of our many robotic cameras. We're going to be using simple materials that you can get. I'm going to tell you exchanges. If you don't have something, you'll know how to be able to make it work. Because the goal of this is that you walk away being able to absolutely do 3D realistic water drops in your own artwork. It's a really cool skill. And if you haven't learned how to do this, you're going to love seeing it. You're going to be putting water drops on everything. I hopefully have enticed you to come drop water on all your art. So get your paint, get your stuff, come back, and for real, I'm going to show you how to do this. So for this lesson, I'm going to take a 9x12 watercolor block. It's like a pad where all the pages are glued together. What's important for you at home is that it's a 140-pound cold press. I like blocks because when I'm doing a very wet technique, it prevents the wrinkling from overwhelming the project. And then when it dries, it stretches it out. Hey, you. Guess what else I'm using today?
What else?
I'm using some gouache.
Ooh,
I'm very excited
I have to
him
move
know.
it down so they can see the gouache.
Gouache.
It's too high.
It's too high?
I'll adjust it. It's okay.
Gouache is not showing. It's right here. I could lower the gouache. I could put out some gouache lower. There we go. This is gouache. So it looks a little bit like acrylic paint, doesn't it? It's not actually. It is like watercolor. It has a similar binder and everything, but it's opaque. And having a little white around is fine. If you don't have white gouache, you can use acrylic though. But this is what it is, gouache. So that's going to be for our highlights to give us those little like pops of reflection on the water drops. That's going to be so essential. I also have a chalk pastel pencil. This one is in titanium white. Any white pencil will work. It's fine. We're just giving ourselves some opportunities to make the highlights. I'm going to be using a plethora of colors to paint the background, and I'm going to let you see me paint the background so you can see every part of this process and really understand how it's going to work. The other thing that I'm going to use is a watercolor blue pencil to sketch in my water drops if necessary. So these are the tools that I have set aside. The first thing that I'm going to do is paint a bunch of colors on my pad of paper in a wet into wet method, and I'm going to pre-wet my paper with a number 4 soft aqua quill.
Nice.
Yeah, I like these quite a lot, and they're a lot of fun. And what I'm going to want for this is very deep color so that the water drops really pop on it. And I think I will start with red, right? Because let's go kind of rainbow. I'm going to get a lot of Pyrrole Red loaded onto here. Look at that nice dark red. So the reason I want a dark color is so that the water drops really will pop. And I want you to see how you can do it over many different colors. This will help you understand, like, oh, if I'm adding it to a rock or to a leaf or strawberry or any of those things. I'm going to take a little of my nickel Azo Yellow and my transparent Pyrrole Orange here, you know, because rainbows.
Because rainbows.
Because rainbows. And I like that it's going to be kind of artful. I'm looking forward to this, actually. Back into my nickel Azo Yellow, which is my favorite. There, look at that go. You could use any yellow you have on your watercolor pad. We're just going to make a bright, saturated rainbow across the page to start building our water drops on. And this is going to really let us see how every set of colors, right? I'm going to get some green going. Can do a water drop. I think that's the point I'm making here.
Okay.
Every set of colors. I'm just getting my Phthalo Blue. This was Phthalo Blue right here. Not Phthalo Blue. Phthalo Green. What am I saying?
It's a very sharp green.
It's a very sharp green, and I love phthalo as a color. I'm here with my blue. I'm going to make sure it's really saturated. Because remember, watercolor will lighten as it dries. And here's what's interesting. This is going to be visually interesting enough where you could actually, I'm going to take Quinacridone Magenta and Ultramarine Blue and make a purple, you know, because the end of the rainbow, where you could hang this on your wall. You know, it's weird how things, even like water drops, can be fascinating to look at enough for them to hang on your wall. Now, for the next part to work, this needs to completely dry. And I'm going to want to not rush that along with my hairdryer. I'm going to want to let these colors kind of blend into each other and soak into each other and soften. Yes, this is a technique video, but again, this is going to be so pretty when it's done. I want you to understand all the layers of why it's going to work visually. Mm-hmm. So let's let it dry, and through the magic of video, come back and we'll do the next step. So once your paper is completely dry and the watercolor is settled, and you can see that when it settles, you have all these beautiful moments and passages, we can come in and start making our water drop shapes. Water drops can be round, they can be unusual. I'm using, again, that watercolor pencil that we talked about, and I'm picking this one because it's going to reflect the glazing that we're going to do to get the shaping of our water drop. So I'm going to put one across different colors and arrange them through the subject. Mm-hmm. I want to make some big and some small. And I also want to put them on different zones so that you can see how the color of the background isn't really the most important part of what makes this work. I'm just making lots of little circles. I don't want to get too crazy because, again, this is a lesson.
Then you'll be here dotting all day.
I could, though. You could absolutely make this a whole composition of just this particular work, which I think is really cool. Now, so you can kind of lightly see, and in the traceable, if you go to the website, there'll be a traceable of the drops. Not that you would need them, and I highly recommend that you would make your own, but if you were not ready there quite yet, you would have this. Now the next part is we're going to start to create some of the glazing, some of the shadows, some of the stuff that's going on. And I'm going to take, this is a number 14 soft aqua round. Mm-hmm. I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to get just some of this, even, this sort of like dirty blue color.
Why'd you select that brush?
I selected this brush because it has a nice point and it's very controlled, and I like it super much. I'm letting a little of the Quin get in there. So it's sort of like a gray blue. I'm going to come here out on the outside of this. Kind of glaze out that little shadow. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. And it's always interesting to me to see how the shadows of the things really help us see them.
It gives it a reference for the ground.
It does give us a reference for the ground. Now I may come in with my brush and kind of rinse this out. I'm going to do an interesting thing. I'm going to pick up maybe a little of that color right there.
Oh.
I'll be exaggerating this with my gouache, but this will be the lens that's reflecting through. Right? And the same thing when I go through. If I'm going to put anything down where I'm showing these shadows, I'm going to want to also come back and kind of erase that little reflection. Does that make sense?
I think so.
I'm going to have to, I use, and I'll make sure that you guys have some examples of water drops on the website. I use a reference of water drops, even though formulaically you can absolutely, and that's what you see me kind of getting here is I have my thing set on too short of an auto lock time. It's like, oh yeah, 2 minutes. That's just, nope. Let's go back to never. I'll get it later. Just remind me at the end. I've got to turn that off. But you can see I'm going to just make sure that that's coming out there. Just getting a little bit of this going. And you just get a little of the color. This is the Phthalo Blue and the Quinacridone Magenta. Right, so we're using this in what's considered like a glazing, kind of technique here, is what you've got going. So coming here, and since we're creating that light source, we're going to just make sure that our light source kind of comes out in the same way. This is our shadow, and then our lens will come through that. And that's always fun for me to play with. Just creating those little shadows under every water drop. On the toe is a good idea. You don't want it to be thick on the back side. It's thick on this side, the forward side. And I'm going to go through and kind of put the shadow through all my drops and then come back and lift out the reflection. And again, like I said, I'm going to come in and strengthen it with the gouache.
That's the white stuff?
Yeah, that's with the white stuff, which is very opaque and will let me do that. But I think it's a good practice to get into if you can, doing as much as possible without anything but the watercolor. Kind of, you can already see that those lenses like really show through right there.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't really matter what you glaze over. This will work. Now, there's another type of work like this, which is called localized color. And we're not exactly doing that here. This is a simplified and very effective method. But there's another method after this, which is localized color, which would mean instead of having this blue glaze, which I put over everything, I would use the color that is here, but a deeper value or a grayer value of it. And when you get into painting like collections of glasses together, that's a good idea to do that. So you see I've kind of gotten everything here. And I'm going to rinse out. And we can definitely come in and erase a little.
Lift
kind
a
of
little
light.
bit.
It's a fussy bit, but it's going to look so good when you do it. Erase just a little bit of the light. That's a good reason that good paper matters, is that you can do this sort of subtractive work. And there are mediums that you can get that will let you do this also. You know, and again, we're going to come back with the gouache, so we've got some coverage there. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to come to the back side a little bit, right? If the shadow is here, then I'm going to have a little bit of a counterbalance shadow right here, and I'm just making sure that I do a nice job of that. I like to leave some light. Pull that back a little bit. Blend this a little forward. There we go. Coming forward a little bit. And just come forward a little bit. So I'm putting the shadow here, and then on the opposite end, I'm putting another little bit of shading. And this is one of those areas where, yeah, you could do localized color in your water drop. What you see me doing is like pulling up if I don't want to have too much coming forward and I want to clean up. You can see I pretty easily clean up. And what's nice about watercolor is it will really let us do drops because the way it blooms and softens, it tends to lend itself, in my opinion, as a medium to effects of water. You know, and we can just glaze in and layer in as we go. So forward shadow, back shadow.
Huh.
This will work on a strawberry leaf or anything. And we'll come in later and we'll drop some water drops on some leaves, and you'll see what I mean about this being a fun technique that you can do to get a little pop on your work. And just anywhere I want to balance that out or kind of shade that. Can you see how we shade it?
Mm-hmm.
Do a little blend. Soften it. Here where the blue is a little darker, it might be a little darker on that back shadow, just so that it has contrast.
Right.
And these really happen in the reflections. That's an important thing to realize too, is that the water drops happen in the reflections.
Because they're kind of transparent.
They themselves are very transparent.
So it's all the distortion and reflections that you see.
Exactly. And one nice thing I like to do is I'll take my pencil, I've gotten it a little bit wet. I can come in and, really sort of define a line around these, which I think is nice. Because water drops have like that water tension.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good to keep a little watercolor pencil around.
Good to keep it around.
Yeah, I like to have Crondash very much. And Cretacolor, and to have around. There's a little grip of them I tend to like. And you can see that's going to help me kind of get those hard edges that I need to get. And then I'm going to come here, soften with my damp brush, and make sure that I have also soft edges in my water drops. Because I don't want these lines. You can see I soften this as well. Just kind of take it in. Easy to build up. I'll just come through and work that out.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to do any smaller drops, I would want a smaller brush or brush with a finer point.
Ah. That really adds the dimension.
Just giving them the beginning of dimension, you're starting to see that. Now we want this to be completely dry, and for this, I do think it's okay to use your hairdryer to dry because I don't really need it to settle. If you want to keep letting it settle, you absolutely can do that. I'm going to use my hairdryer right here and kind of quick set it so I can get into that next layer. So we have this sort of architecture for our water drops and some things that we can do to help us kind of really get in there is I'm going to take this Corel. It has a slightly finer point. I'm going to definitely get into my purple a little bit more and make sure that I have some more contrast. You can see that's just a little bit of a finer point. This is a number 6 Corel. It's a multimedia brush. You could use it for acrylic or watercolor. I do tend to be single use on my brushes, so once a brush has been...
It's got a very sharp point.
It does. And once a brush has been declared watercolor, I tend to keep it watercolor. And then if it's been declared acrylic, I tend to keep it acrylic.
And that's so that you don't get any paint buildup in it?
Acrylic tends to wear out brushes the quickest. So if I have a brush that I know is really fantastic for watercolor, I very rarely want to lose it to the life-shortening aspects of acrylic. So I'm going to come here and we're going to do a little bit of the gouache. I'm going to get my brush a little bit wet, and I'm going to load up the gouache. And you can see that it's very much like watercolor in that it's water activatable. The thing about this is this will remain good like even as it dries, whereas, you know, like acrylic might not be as good even as it dries. I'm going to come across here and kind of add a little white highlight. The fun one. And I'll add a pop of one right here. That kind of helps shape that water drop, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Where the shadow is, I add another little highlight. All right. Here we go, just adding a little bit of that kind of reflection up front. And we're just really trying to find those high point reflections on the water drops that give them that shape. And you can see I'm just building up the opaqueness.
Ooh, it'll sparkle.
Yeah, a little bit of boom.
And that's the light just splashing through onto from the lens of the drop.
That's a great way of describing it, John, is the drop is a lens. Now I can rinse out and even blend my white because, again, it's like watercolor. So much like that shadow, look, I can blend this. And that's rather nice, isn't it?
Hmm.
And because, unlike acrylic, when acrylic dries, if you're using acrylic for this, once the acrylic is dry, it's going to be dry. You can't really move it or negotiate with it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
With this, you can negotiate with it all the way through. So
it sounds so reasonable.
Well, it can be quite reasonable. But you can see I can do some blending here. Put a much brighter light course through here. And then when that gets that brighter light course, look at how it really just
really makes them shine.
It does really make them shine.
They're all
really
lensy.
Makes them take shape and it's worth just spending a little time blending and working it out.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I highly suggest that you practice the skill, create different backgrounds, you know, splatter, stone, just anything different, and then come in and see if you can't, you know, make water drops that feel real on any of them. And here I am with my gouache. I could have used Frisket to hold back some of this. I could have. All right. You can see come back with a very bright kind of thing. And then on the back here, yeah, I can add that little reflection. And then when you add that little reflection, man, it's like pop.
Yeah.
Isn't it though?
I think so. I like how the colors and it, you know, it works together and it makes, you know, like I like the little lens effect. Like I said, it it looks very
You could do this with like,
dimensional.
if I was having trouble with the gouache, I could use my pastel pencil, but I'm just not today. So, you know, that's always nice when you don't have trouble with the gouache. Don't have any trouble with the gouache. And you see, I'm just thinning it with water. If you have watercolors, I do recommend investing in a black and a white gouache. You won't need them often, but when you do need them, they are a terrific add-on. And I'm just going ahead and highlighting the front of the drop where the lens is going to come out. And then I will go through and blend and adjust that and then put the lensing on there.
It's good.
It's fun, right?
Yeah. See, when you look at it from the overhead, you can really kind of see how dimensional it is. You know what this reminds me of? The Trapper Keeper artist you like so much.
Lisa Frank?
Yes.
Lisa Frank style water drops. I can't really deny that.
It's got some Trapper Keeper feel to it.
Frank feel to it.
She used to like that kind of stuff too.
I still like that kind of stuff.
With
you know, I feel like there is a thinking in the world, right, that as we go through life and we achieve certain stages that we should leave behind certain things and embrace other things. But sometimes that's just not being authentically you. You know, and I think it's okay to hold on to the things that are very defining in your character.
That's true.
Color and silliness and playfulness and unicorns and rainbows and Lisa Frank are very defining in my character. So I'm going to get some good amount on here. Come back and do maybe some of those rear view little water reflections. So in this practice, what you're going to start to see is the way that light creates form in things that are essentially see-through. And it's something you want to have an understanding of. Whether you're painting acrylic with me or watercolor with me, you want to understand how you don't paint what you can't see, you paint the things you can. You can't see see-through water, can't see that, right? Where it's totally see-through and transparent.
Right.
But you can see all the light and shadows. That get cast, can't you?
Yeah.
You can observe, you know, the way that the light is sent through a water drop. And, you know, you can fast forward through stuff like this. There are a lot of fast forward kind of little demos of this, but I just want you to see what it takes. You know, for something like this, for it to look like what it is. And you can see I will kind of come in sometimes and
strengthen that.
Yeah, I will strengthen it from time to time, and the reason is that, you know, again, it's just opaque watercolor, so it's still kind of watercolor.
Iterative.
Yeah, you've got to get in here and, you know.
Every time you add a little layer, it adds more dimension.
It does. It'll add a little more dimension to what you have.
Like, yeah, shake the water off that piece of paper.
Well, and that's what you're trying to create, is that sense. And sometimes working on a single skill, splatter, stars, galaxies, it doesn't really matter what the single skill is. Sometimes working on a single skill.
I'm working on sarcasm.
I'd like to suggest that you've mastered it and there's no need for you to work on it further.
I think it's a whole life journey there. I don't know that you can truly just master that. I would say that I'm still a student of this, for sure. The more I think I know, the more I realize I don't know.
The more you're like, I don't even know. You can always go through with your, I'm still in my corral, just, you know, for the strong point, and make sure that this shadow is also strong. So it's easy to go through something and go, okay, we got there. But, take the time to see that. And again, I'll put on the website, I'll put 3 or 4 different water drop references that you could use to practice on. And you just create free-form little abstract watercolor backgrounds and practice your water drops. If you were to do that 3-4 times, your whole relationship to the skill set would be completely different. Mm-hmm. Your whole relationship to seeing water would be completely different. One of the things when I do Acrylic April, and we did water as a topic last year, was just that sometimes just spending time with an idea. And you can see what I'm doing is I'm making sure that I leave that lens kind of protected, right? So these things can make quite deep shadows. And that's the other thing to be aware of, that water can cast a deep shadow. I'm going to end up fussing with this so long that nobody will click the video. But
no, this is good.
It's just nice to know what you're getting into. And even in that, I realized that I had forgotten some lensing on a couple of them because I went and did the shadows. And so if you've got a pattern that's super repeated, you will find that there are times that you might miss some of your work. And I can always soften that with a little bit of water. And that's important to realize. You can pick up and you can soften any of the lensing that you want to, strengthen any of the lensing that you want to. Every time I add a little layer of gouache. Now I could do the bleed proof white, which you've seen me use, and that would probably give me a much more opaque cover, but then I would have to really be constantly fussing with it. And that could be a lot. When you treat a subject like a water drop, the same way you would treat a floral or a figurative painting, right? Paying attention to detail.
Yeah.
It helps you understand the nature. This is when people are like, when you study art, well, yeah, you can go to art school. That's very cool. Do that for sure. But when you're studying art, sometimes what you're actually doing is just practicing different concepts or ideas. All right, I'm going to call this great. Let's look at it overhead.
It is great.
I'm going to call it great. And say, look, I mean, that's kind of a fun subject thing, right? So what would be really involved in doing this? This is what you would be involved in if you're a beginner and you're trying to do this kind of skill. And maybe you're trying to make something cool for sharing online or with friends. Or maybe you're, wanting something beautiful and rainbow and symbolic in your life. I think this is something that works. And so you can practice a skill and still make a piece of art that you might actually like to keep. I'm going to go ahead and give this a signature.
That's good, because we wouldn't know who did it without
that. I'll go ahead and sign with my watercolor pencil because I used it in the process of creating this. So
it is a appropriate.
Yeah. So that's my little rule is if I used it in the media, then I feel comfortable signing with any of the things that I used in it.
Yeah.
Signing with gouache would be kind of I could do it here.
It'd
be tough to do on the white.
Yeah.
Did you guys like that? I hope you like that.
I like the dimensionality of these.
I think sometimes working on a few little technical skills is good. It gets us out of our own heads, and it also gives us stuff for our art box that carries forward into other projects that we're doing. Let's meet back again after this and use this skill on a subject.
If you had a trapper keeper, this would be the perfect thing to put in the front of it.
Yes, it would.
Just slip it right there in the plastic. It'd be fine.
Practice your water drops. Share with me your result. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. And I want to see you at a watercolor block really soon. Bye-bye.